My name is Ulysses Wilhelm, and I'm the ultimate historian. Please make note of that for future reference. Wars have been fought over buckets. I'm not surprised one could be used for murder. Interesting. Both the knife and the rifle were present at the crime scene, but only the knife was used. To reiterate, both the rifle and the knife were next to the victim's body. Huh? Yes, we already know both weapons were at the scene of the crime. Does that change anything about the murder? Why would you resort to scratching when you're carrying a gun? We know she was armed. We know she was blinded. We figured out how she died. How is this not a closed case? Even if he did manage to splash her, the girl should have sustained intense facial burns. However, aside from her eyes, her face was relatively untouched. Given the severity, I'd liken it to a crime of passion. Well spoken. If Wolfgang is adamant about the killer's intentions, we should have faith in him. After completing this setup, the killer retreated to the far end of the janitor's closet and waited for the victim's arrival. The killer could have made noise to attract the victim's attention. Either way, the victim tried to open the door. So Jean, Grace, and Kai attended Cassidy and Jet's game tournament. And Mark. Actually, I don't recall a power outage either. Well, we only shared a dorm for one night. Let me provide some context. As you may remember, after Desmond suggested everyone bunk together, the male students were directed to the dining hall. Once there, we played rock, paper, scissors to determine who would partner with who. Jet partnered with Mark, Desmond with Jean, Damon with Kai, and I with Wolfgang. Those were the pairings at the time. However, the following day, Grace and I agreed to swap rooms. For reasons. Thus, I became Winona's roommate, and Grace became Wolfgang's. Yes, that's one of the cardinal rules of mysteries. Strange. He told Grace he wouldn't attend the tournament, but then said the opposite to Toshiko. No. The only time I recall him receiving anything was when Tozu distributed those envelopes. Not to interrupt, but on the subject of blackmail, did Wolfgang ever confront the person he had? Well, if you recall what Wolfgang said originally, regardless of the blackmail's contents, it would be treated as a matter between the recipient and the subject of the blackmail, and no one else. Which makes me wonder, could whether or not Wolfgang confronted his person clue us into what had originally been written on that note? If that person somehow realized Wolfgang carried their blackmail, but never came forward about it, they could have demanded Wolfgang show it to them. Hence the mention of a secret. However, if Wolfgang did confront his person, I don't see why that same person would then send him a threatening note. Not least act coy about information they both know. Yes, the secret in question may actually be a reference to Wolfgang's blackmail, not the sender's. Ah! Wolfgang's envelope had the same signature. Yes, if I may add on to what Jean said, the burns actually bore a strong resemblance to what you might see in cases of corona paralysis. A big old tree. Yes, that's how I would describe the burns on Wolfgang. Not necessarily. This is only something I thought of just now, but the reason Wolfgang sustained burns similar to that of lightning strike victims may be because whatever inflicted his burns was equivalent in damage to a lightning strike. Metal is a conductor, yes, but I don't see how a vent could inflict Wolfgang's burns. Yes, I do. Why? Sure. The boiler room consists of a small concrete platform surrounded by ankle-deep water. Throughout the room are boxes filled with various garbage, and in the back looks to be a generator, charred beyond belief. What you just heard is a brief summary of my notes. Not a toy gun, a taser gun. I'm not sure how the taser fits in with this case, though. It doesn't seem to have been used. How so? I didn't catch any sort of string protruding from it. Jean, do you know anything about this? As Desmond's roommate, perhaps you spotted something inside his dorm. I see. Then both of you can be ruled out as suspects. No thank you. It certainly explains the bruising on his neck. Cassidy discussed this matter earlier in the trial. Comparing what she said just now to my notes from then, All the details match up. Did anyone else hear these footsteps? Yes, you'd think a killer would use that moment to run away. Winona and I were in the building with the tree all morning. In fact, yes, Desmond and Eloise should have witnessed us walking over there, as those two were in the courtyard at the time. The accusations against Diana rely on her entering the room. Your proposal would absolve her of guilt, and then try and sentence the rest of us to punishment. Then she fled the crime scene, hoping the rest of us would never learn the truth. Agreed. We could easily miss something important if we turn our noses away. So the flipping of the doorknob was premeditated? Speaking of which, Diana, I'm curious to know, did you unlock the door before or after the tournament attendees arrived downstairs? I don't believe Jean meant it in a literal sense. Agreed. It would help us better understand the timeline of events, and potentially even validate Diana's testimony. The pharmacy does have a large collection of over-the-counter sedatives, but there's too many for us to isolate any specific one, whilst an injection would be much quicker. I see. Winona and I were in our dorm room together. If Wolfgang wasn't killed with the taser gun or the generator, what other options are we left with? Perhaps it's the fault of the taser gun? The electrical discharge it released might have connected with the generator and created an overabundance of energy, which caused everything in the circuit to pop. That doesn't say anything about the taser's involvement. Didn't we establish a while ago that the generator is a central part of this case? Looking at my notes... When we originally visited the pharmacy, I recorded everything I saw. A bright red metal object would have definitely caught my eye, but I don't see one written here. Is the tablet in your example a stand-in for the battery? I see. And what object is the divider supposed to be? Something like that would result in an explosion. You say the killer tied one end of the cord to the vent and the other end to the battery. However, indoor extension cords are much longer than regular cords. 9 meters is significantly longer than the distance between the vent and the boiler room floor. They can be upwards of 9 or more meters in length, as opposed to the average cord's 2 meters. If the killer wanted to tie the battery to the cord's other end, they would be tying it to something which is already submerged in water. I'm not sure I see the point in tying the cord around him. Agreed. How do you even submerge the battery into the water under those circumstances? Are you implying the cord can adjust its length at will? I don't think that answers the question. The vent can be opened? Hello. There's something I still don't understand about your theory. It's to do with the logistics of the cord. Its size. I understand the boiler room vent can be opened, maybe not all the way, but enough to fit an extension cord through. What's bothering me, however, is that the boiler room vent was closed during the investigation, which means it must have been closed during the murder. Indoor extension cords may be thin, but the plugs on either side of them aren't. Between the gaps in the vent grate, how can the killer fit both those plugs? Either the boiler room vent was never involved, or it was open at some point, and someone else closed it. That is my issue. My point still stands. My notes say it was closed, and I'm fairly confident in my notes. There were no opportunities for the killer to enter the boiler room and close the vent. From my understanding, you and Kai entered the boiler room after you heard Diana leave, which, hypothetically, gives the killer only minutes to close the vent. Assuming the killer is a third party. If there were no gaps, how did you even open the vent in the first place? I see. When put like that, whether or not the boiler room vent was closed isn't really relevant, so we can reduce it down to 8 people. Damon, Kai, Grace, Eva, Cassidy, Jed, Mark, and John. While you aren't technically wrong, I don't think that counts as an argument. This I can confirm. My notes on the box's exteriors mention nothing about watermarks. How so? What do you mean? It seems The setup of this trap occurred across 3 phases. Phase 1 took place in the boiler room and involved tying a lithium battery to an extension cord. The cord was then slid through the grates of the closed boiler room vent, presumably until it almost poked out the other end of the ventilation shaft. Phase 2, by contrast, was carried out in the dining hall. The aforementioned cord was tied around the dining hall vent, which was then left open. This must have happened after Cassidy, Mark, and Jet were already done redecorating. For the third and final phase, the battery was carefully suspended over the generator. All these steps combined created a pulley system, which could only be triggered by closing the dining hall vent. Is there anything I'm missing? Huh? That's true. We still haven't explained how she robbed 2 people's rooms without being caught. How does that connect to Desmond or Jet in any way? Ingrid, Wolfgang doesn't have blue eyes. A crucial part of the killer's plan would involve sliding the cord through the boiler room vent and out the other end into the dining hall. So they could then walk upstairs to the dining hall and tie the protruding part of the cord to the dining hall vent. Meaning? Good day. Yes, excuse me. I must take note of this. I have to know more. According to my notes, my thoughts exactly, and so on and so on. What's happening? I wasn't expecting this. That was very incorrect. Actually, I need answers. Where's my coffee? Sleepy. I'm glad. Much appreciated. You're really nice. Amazing. Glad I stayed awake. Gee, thank you for that. It doesn't make sense. The struggle. Terrible. Sorry you had to see that. I don't recall. Well, do you think?